Madam Speaker, I adopt the arguments on record already by the other members of the opposition, where we've given indication of our support or lack of support of the two bills presently before the House today. Before I touch on matters pertaining to the procurement bill, I wish to speak to some that affect my constituency directly, as has been and remains somewhat the tradition of members of this honorable House when they rise to their feet. Madam Speaker, I rise on behalf of the great constituents of the St. Anne's constituency. That is the constituency that goes from Village Road, the eastern side of Village Road, runs along the foreshore, along Montague Bay, along Eastern Road, and continues past Prince Charles. It goes behind the good member from Yamacraw's constituency, and it ends at what is now the shopping market known as Solomon's. Madam Speaker, it's unusual for my constituency to receive infrastructural upgrades. So when they do happen, I quietly get excited, as do my constituents. And I've been in discussion with the member from West Grand Bahama and Bimini today, very briefly, but we did discuss the improvements made to Village Road, with the road being redone. And this is, Madam Speaker, the westernmost boundary of the St. Anne's constituency. The eastern side belongs to the St. Anne's constituency, and the western side belongs to the Freetown constituency. There is a roundabout that's been erected in front of the Bahamas National Trust, as well as the entrance to Queen's College. And I think I have the support of the member from West Grand Bahama and Bimini when I had suggested that maybe a statue of the member from St. Anne's and the statue of the member from Freetown standing face to face and shaking hands in a example for the nation of peace and conflict resolution. It had his support, Madam Speaker, and maybe if you join on behalf of the great constituents of Bamboo Town, we can get it across the goal line and set a wonderful example for everybody that lives in the area. Madam Speaker, I was pleased when I climbed the steps into this honorable chamber today. I was delayed from entering because the chaplain was completing his prayers with the good honorable men and women of this House. But I had the opportunity to look left, and I noticed that the sign on your door now, Madam Speaker, is properly titled, giving you the respect that you're deserving of a year in. So I'm thankful for that, and I congratulate you on being humble until that was actually done. Madam Speaker, the road improvements at Village Road and the St. Anne's constituency, they have now been completed. They go beyond St. Andrew's Drive in the south and all the way north to the Montague traffic light. They still, however, need to have the lines put down on them, but all of the hole issues that were either for the purposes of manhole covers or geographical issues relating to the drainage and flooding that would naturally occur after a heavy rain have been plugged. But there, in addition to the markings along the road, there still is an issue with the sidewalks. So we've got this beautiful black carpet of tar laid down from St. Andrew's Drive all the way down to the Montague traffic light. And the sidewalks, because of the heavy equipment that was used, this was a road that was essentially kept open the entire time that it was under construction. That, I think, could be a first when you consider how large it is. But as a result of trying to accommodate the vehicular traffic up and down Village Road, a number of the heavy equipment machines used in the process, and I know because my law office is on the eastern side of Village Road, a number of the heavy equipment vehicles that were used in the process of constructing this new road caused significant damage not only to the sidewalks but also to some some of my constituents' personal property, whether it is residential property walls or commercial property markers. And it will be interesting to see if the Ministry of Works does what I think they've undertaken and committed to, and that is ensure that they carry out the repairs to those damaged properties before they formally vacate the site of construction. Madam Speaker, in addition to the roadworks at Village Road, I know that there were some plans submitted to the Ministry of Works for a park improvement project in at the end of Prince Charles, which is known as McPherson's Bend. That is the Bay Area, where a number of constituents, not only from Yamacraw, but also from St. Anne's, and I expect from Seabreeze. It's one of the few open water access spaces that we still have in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas that provides opportunities for bathers, Bahamians to swim, to bounce around in the shallows. Remember? To bounce around in the shallows and generally to gather and talk and have discussions in an open air setting, which is, as you can imagine, quite wonderful. We all know that the best breeze comes out of the east, and St. Anne's has for many years been the beneficiary of the best location in the Bahamas. But there was a project pending that the former Member of Parliament for St. Anne's, Theodore Brent Simonette, brought to the Ministry of Works, and I think it got through all the approval steps except for the Department of Physical Planning. I'm going to have to look into whether or not that has since received final project approval, but it was a project that would have remedied somewhat of an eyesore that had been left after the removal of the invasive casuarina trees all along the bay there. So when those casuarina trees were removed, which was something that was supported by the Bahamas National Trust because of the root system, even though it looks like these casuarina trees, also known as Australian pines, even though it looks like these root systems are actually holding the shoreline together, what they're doing is they're killing anything underneath them, and eventually the vegetation and the growth underneath them erodes away. So they're not actually beneficial to coastlines in this Commonwealth. And the remediation efforts had begun, seawalls were put in place, but a little beautification needs a bit more further investment, and that's what the second project that I think should now be fully approved by the Ministry of Works. I think the good member from Central and South is either involved with the Ministry of Works or it's my colleague from South Beach. So if he could just make a mental note of that. I know it's going to be upon me as the Member of Parliament to formally write the ministry and see if we can get that brought back up to the table. The area is well attended right now. That's in large part thanks to Mr. Burrows, who's a retired Bahamian gentleman, and what he's done is taken an initiative with some of the other regular users of that area, and they've spray painted in an artistic manner and beautified these blue bins that you would, I think in the Bahamas, the bigger supplier is Coca-Cola. So you can get these blue bins from Coca-Cola. You can spray paint them in a beautiful pattern so they're not an eyesore. And so long as you take one extra step to try and prevent them from being stolen by your being stolen, Madam Speaker, then it actually works effectively. So what Mr. Burrows has done, and I think Mrs. Butler, who is the daughter or one of the daughters of former Speaker of the House, Sir Arlington Butler, they've both taken a great pride in their surroundings down there at McPherson's Bend. And Mrs. Butler regularly, when she walks in the morning time, she's one of these persons that has the gift to wake up extremely early in the morning, long before I think I begin to shift in my bed. But when she does her walks, she picks up trash as she goes along. And if she doesn't remove that trash on her own, she will place it in one of the bins that are there. And for the most part, it's a balance between the Public Parks and Beaches Authority doing a collection, which isn't necessarily as regularly as constituents would like, or it's down to Mr. Burrows when things get backed up too much to come down in his truck and remove the waste. So I think if we can now move beyond the good deeds that have been done on Village Road into McPherson's Bend project and have that be the next project that comes off the ground for the great constituents of St. Anne's. So when I say the great constituents of St. Anne's, Madam Speaker, I don't think anyone in this House will argue with that, because there are at least 7 members of Parliament and 5 cabinet ministers that live in that great constituency, which I think is a record, Madam Speaker, and they have all admitted to having the best representative in the House. Myself, of course, Madam Speaker. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So those are 2 projects and 2 issues that are affecting the constituents in my constituency. And a third one, which has apparently taken a turn for the worst, is not only do we have a lot of persons that use the bay at McPherson's Bend for walking, exercise, jogging, early morning, late evening, but the eastern end of St. Anne's, as if it was 2 halves, the eastern portion of St. Anne's will generally use Montague Bay and Montague Beach and the park that was developed down there for their exercise and beach enjoyment, swimming fitness, etc. Very early in the morning, very late into the evening, just before it gets completely dark. Their problems, Madam Speaker, has been the expansion of commercial vending stalls at the Montague Beach site. Now, the Montague Beach site has a beach that has had a history of what I would describe as a seasonal beach. Sometimes the sand is there, sometimes it goes away. But environmentally approved measures were implemented to erect slips of boulders to retain the sand at the beach. And it's become one of the few available destinations for family to really enjoy public holidays, days when school may be off with the children, get them out on the swing set systems that are there, and for the elderly that are looking to keep their limbs and joints functioning, to exercise and do physiotherapy down in the water. But unfortunately, Madam Speaker, there are now three vending stalls. The third one I raised in the House last year. It probably was in the early part of October of 2022. And I know at the time, one of the members of Parliament had indicated that there was a stop order issued. There's been some confusion. Now the understanding is that all of the stalls there have approval. And it's difficult, because I can see if you have no plan at all for a public space and you need to make something up as you go. But when you look at Montague Beach and Montague Bay, you'll appreciate that in the former F&M administration under Hubert Ingram, I think Loretta Butler Turner was the representative at the time. She and the Honorable former Prime Minister Hubert Alexander Ingram had set up Montague Beach with these groins, these big boulder groins, 3 or 4 of them to retain the stand. They had improved the park with its amenities. They had built put in an access road around there. They had redone what was a previously constructed public dock, and now it's a beautiful, well-used public dock. And with the available land that they had at the time, not only did they use it to provide for a accessible, protected access area, public park area for families, but they also provided a designated space that would be used for commercial purposes. The ramp was at Montague Bay for almost my entire childhood, and there would be plywood stalls that eventually increased in number over the years and decades, but they would generally sell fish on those stalls and conch. That was just one slip of a access to the water that had the stalls on either side. When that Ingram administration finished their term, before they completed, they had not only put in the groins and the family space for persons to enjoy the beach and water access and swing set access, but they had also designated an area for commercial activity. Now, however, we're looking at that family space in most people's minds becoming the next Potter's Key or the next Arawak Key. And if we didn't have a plan that already factored in a commercial area, then maybe that's all we could conclude in an evaluation. But because there is a better plan in place, Madam Speaker, we should not be proceeding with the plan that apparently this administration, at least for the time being, is not moving away from. Now, the
chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. This is actually a matter on which the member for St. Anne's and I are in agreement, and I think he's communicated with the Ministry of Works. I've communicated with the Ministry of Works. A number of persons have. The last communication I have doesn't seem to indicate that it's approved. I just looked quickly in my email, and there's an email from the Permanent Secretary dated the 3rd of January of this year, which thanks Alexandra Hall for drawing the matter to his attention, to the Ministry's attention. And he says, I quote, I've directed the Building Control Section to take all legal steps to have the situation resolved because of their responsibility for the management of public beaches and parks. I'm drawing the matter to the attention of the chairman of the authority, Mr. Michael Bonamy, MP, and collectively we will resolve to remove the illegal structure, not to be confused as a shanty town, because the right had suggested it was a shanty town developing as the law requires. I note the member's assertion, and I undertake to check that this is still the current position at Montague with this structure.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Madam Speaker. And
You
you
may
can
continue.
see exactly why I had mentioned earlier that it would be a great idea for that roundabout at Village Road and St. Anne's School to have the member from Freetown standing on one side and myself on the other side, and we're connecting in the middle, shaking hands. Not only is that two members of Parliament that are neighboring members of Parliament that are working together, but that is two political parties that are finding a way to get it done for the people. And Madam Speaker, I hope that the conclusion of this vending stall issue is as the member from Freetown has suggested. I know now from what has been said here that we're both waiting for a final determination on the matter and final decision on the matter. But as we do look forward to how we address the erection and existence of vendors on public parks and beaches sites, I think that there needs to be consultation with members of the public so that decisions and policies aren't being implemented that they were never made aware of. Now, it may be the case, well, it's within the public parks and beaches authority to just simply make determinations as to the use of the land that they have oversight and authority over. But that's not the way I think that we should proceed with planning. We must factor in the views of the public into our planning policy decisions, and we can't get the views of the public if we never go to the public in town hall meetings or other manners of consultation. The vending stalls issue at Montague Beach have created or brought to my attention a few points of public concern. Is when these stalls go there, are the licenses that are issued to the license holder, the tenant, are they subject to conditions that determine the hours of operation. Because if you're gonna have a stall, or if you're gonna have a temporary structure that stays there basically permanently until the license is revoked. If you're gonna have a temporary permanent structure that stays there permanently, is it the expectation, and should the public have an expectation that once it's been licensed, it's gonna be used on a regular basis, and it's not just gonna be a structure that's closed, where shading at the front of it is collecting water, and it begins to become even more of an eyesore. Eyesore because it's not as pretty as the natural environment, number one. Eyesore, number two, is that the structure is not being open on a regular basis. It's not being maintained, and it's not adding to the beautification of the area. Another issue with all of these vending stalls is the health and safety requirements that go into it, and whether or not the license holder is gonna actually be at the site. Because I can get a license, and I think this happens in other areas, possibly even the straw market. I don't mean to offend anybody, but you can get a license, and then you can hire people to work it. In some cases, those persons that are hired to work it are in fact actually subleasing it from the license holder. We really have to increase the manner of the bodies that carry out inspection and enforcement procedures. When these licenses are in fact issued, the ministries, the departments that issue the licenses have, I think, the people's best intention at heart. But if you're not looking back and making sure that the persons that have received the licenses are carrying out their responsibilities, then it's going to continue to become a problem that could be avoided with the proper management. It's not in my nature, Madam Speaker, to just put a little extra attention on the clock. But as I'm speaking off my feet, Madam Speaker, I look forward to when that comes down to the 2-minute mark.
Your partner of the other side of the constituency is next, so, you know, you could probably give me a minute.
Yeah.
You have such a good working relationship, you and Freetown?
Yeah, we do. That was my old, not pupil master, but my old boss, gentleman from Freetown. I was a good worker. I don't know how much money I brought in from him at those times, but I was a good worker. Madam Speaker, the Public Finance Management Bill has been addressed by my colleagues. I'm going to touch on a few things about the Public Procurement Bill. It's pleasing to have heard today the representations from different members on the government side about how provisions are in place under this new legislation to ensure either women-owned businesses or youth-owned businesses can get a fair crack at least a minimum percentage of the available contracts. I think that the act itself will define what a youth is, because we need to ensure that persons with the right skill and trades are bringing the service contractual delivery under the contract that they're awarded. Before I became a candidate for the constituents of St. Anne's, I served as chairman of the Free National Movement St. Anne's Constituency Association. And I, as a Bahamian, was extremely excited about this e-procurement process that billboards were advertising under the last administration. It's not usual for the citizenry to understand that there are contracts that they can receive through the government. I think for the most part, members of the public, constituents of St. Anne's in particular, one is now entering the House, Madam Speaker. Members of the public, constituents of St. Anne's, understand that once you finish high school, You try to continue your tertiary education in university or college, College of the Bahamas, maybe University of West Indies, now University of Bahamas, or someplace in the United States. Myself, I went to the United Kingdom, as did many of the other attorneys in here today. And then you get into private business. But a large portion of our high school graduates end up in the civil service, which is and has always been extremely important to our nation. But that, I think, is the general knowledge capacity of most Bahamians. And it wasn't until I saw these e-procurement billboards under the last administration that I realized that this opportunity to participate and receive government contracts for either the delivery of goods, whether it's bleach or other cleaning products, or to have a contract where you have a small business that either grows or is already a big business that picks up a hospital cleaning contract, or a government ministry building cleaning contract, as well as I think what was described as the 1% or the big boy contracts, which I think historically have been some of the larger infrastructural projects that would typically go to a existing company with resources that outmatched smaller business competitors, and they would generally be seen as getting this project, that contract, this contract for the more significant infrastructural upgrades. I think a great example, however, of this procurement process, Madam Speaker, and these government contracts in the Bahamas have been the gentleman, I think it's Otario Mitchell, behind Bahamas Striping, a young Bahamian, might have had one other business partner when they started, got a grant, actually got a grant under a former FMM administration. It might have been one of the small business development grants, not the ones distributed under the last Small Business Development Center initiative, but it allowed them to buy a piece of road striping equipment. And they started off, I think, with maybe one contract in a parking lot. The timing was perfect. They seized the opportunity, and the timing came after that, and there was the Airport Industrial Park project that was going to be, not Airport Industrial Park, but the actual international airport, now known as the Linden-Pinling International Airport. That redevelopment operated by NAD had just come off, and Bahamas Striping was able to collaborate with a foreign company in some of the major road striping and runway striping contracts out at the international airport. And when you look at a little company that started with a $10,000 grant and now realize that a number of the roads, I think, in Exuma right now are being paved by a subsidiary, if not by Bahamas Striping, a subsidiary of the group of companies of Bahamas Striping. I know that they've also, I think, even expanded to where they're bidding on contracts in other Caribbean nations.
They're doing very well.
Then we realized that this public procurement process, not only does it need to be fair, Madam Speaker, so that persons have as much of an equal opportunity as possible to participate, but not only is it fair, it's extremely profitable and beneficial to Bahamians that can not only manage the business that they get into, but ensure that the product that they deliver is up to the standard required by the government, by the ministry department contracting them. You can go, Madam Speaker, essentially from a one-machine enterprise to a multi-million-dollar road paving enterprise. And that is really the window that past administrations on either side have attempted to ensure. And as chairman of the Association for the St. Anne's constituency, I wanted to put focus on ensuring that constituents of all demographics in St. Anne's, because St. Anne's is really a constituency that has all demographics of Bahamians living in it, that all demographics of constituents living in St. Anne's knew what the opportunities were and knew how they could bid on these projects and knew what they would need to put in place before they submitted a bid. I think that this public procurement bill has been discussed in this House today as something that addresses maybe some of the technical issues of the former act being implemented and carried out so that it could report properly. And that I think there was also discussion that you don't need to put land up as security for this new system. You don't need to put money up for security under this new system. You don't even need to pay an application fee under this new system. And that there is roughly 400 odd persons already registered online for the new system. Now, I think that with that 400 number already registered online, every month, maybe it's because of a system capacity issue, you can only have about another 50 or maybe another 100 enter to get into the online system. So that automatically tells me that there could be an issue with everybody being able to participate right away, because if you're not one of the 400, and then if you're not one of the 450, 500, 550, 600, you could be excluded from the application process. And if the door is closed on you, Madam Speaker, you're never going to receive what's inside. So that's something that I hope has a clear explanation, so that when I talk to constituents and when constituents hear this presentation today, they're not going to think that they've been excluded even for a minute, much less a day, a week, a month, 6 months to a year. But we all have constituency offices in each of the 39 constituencies in this great Commonwealth. We all receive a constituency allowance, an allocation budget that goes towards the rent, goes towards the overheads, goes towards a staff member for the office.
Not enough.
But we can,
Not at all.
what's that, sorry?
Not enough. So I advocate for more.
What's that?
It's not enough.
It's never enough. It's never enough, Madam Speaker.
Especially those of us of multiple.
But, Madam Speaker, we all receive an allowance for that purpose. If this House needs to increase the amount so that it is enough, I think we have the 39 people in the right place to do that. But, Madam Speaker, for those that do have an office, or maybe you are one constituency in a zone of 5, say you're part of the 5 that are in Western New Providence, part of the 5 that are in Eastern New Providence. You can come together, Madam Speaker, and maybe the good member from Bain and Grantstown could figure out how this could actually happen, where we have a computer system that has access to the online public procurement site, and that there is a detailed pictured information board on how to maneuver through the site with a list of documents, so that when constituents come in, because a lot of constituents, Madam Speaker, don't have online access in their homes, and if they think that, okay, well, I can find online service in the park, but by the time I get to the third fill-in-the-blank question, I'm going to just be completely lost. By the time they get to the third fill-in-the-blank question in the application process, I'm just going to be completely lost. that individual is gonna decide right there and then. Maybe not every single one, but that individual is gonna decide right there and then that, you know, the opportunity to be a business owner doesn't suit me. And right there and then, that young Bahamian, that young man, that young woman decides right there and then, I'm gonna be an employee for the rest of my life. I'm gonna count on that. I'm already, you know, maybe the individual has issues with their capacity at literacy. Maybe they haven't finished the public school system in the Bahamas with the level of reading requirement necessary, or maybe they're just like me sometimes, that can be completely frustrated when it seems like a technical issue isn't working out for you. But if we could have, Madam Speaker, computers or programs in different zones, in different constituency offices, then this public procurement bill is going to be all the more effective for our constituents. And I hope that will come to fruition. I'll speak to the good member for Bain and Grantstown, because it seems to be that if you speak first, you might get what you asked for, but if you speak sixth, you're going to be waiting much longer. Madam Speaker, I adopt the positions of my fellow colleagues that have been stated in the House already on the public procurement bills and our position on support and non-support. And I thank you very much for listening to me today, and I hope I've been of assistance to my fellow members of Parliament.